All right, I hope you guys had a lot of fun with the pose off exercise. And what I'm going to do is walk through a few poses here, and we're going to kind of fix them up and kind of tweak them a little bit. And I'll use that to kind of talk to you guys a little bit about how I think about posing, how I think about pushing and correcting poses. And we'll also get a chance to keep getting more familiar with working with these puppet rigs. So let's start here with a common problem, which is a balance problem. You can see in this pose here, the weight is being taken by this front foot, but the vast bulk of the weight of the character is suspended way out here over the air. It's probably the center of gravity is really about right here. So this foot is way far out front, and he would easily just tip and fall backwards here. So we definitely need to pull his weight forward on this foot a little bit. Now I could just click and drag this foot back. That's definitely one way to do it. I'm actually going to start with the cog though, because usually in most cases with animation, you've got to kind of keep your feet planted on the ground because you don't want the feet sliding around while it's animating. So we're going to assume here that this foot needs to be in this position. Again, that's not really the case with this particular exercise, but honestly 99% of the time you're going to need to keep your feet locked, and you're going to be moving the weight over the foot rather than the other way around, especially when you're dealing with walks and a character walking across a space and standing and doing things. You don't necessarily have the option to just slide the foot all over the place, otherwise you're going to get that on ice kind of a feeling. So we're just going to kind of pretend that we're in that kind of more common situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of select all of these limbs here. Whoops. And then we're going to just click and drag all these guys forward. So we position his weight now over that foot. There we go. Now we've got some correct balance in this pose. So that's working much, much better. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to create a little more of a flow with the arms here. For one thing, the shoulders are really offset. And there's going to be situations where you're going to have one shoulder lower and one shoulder higher, and that's all right. But if you did that, let's say we keep the shoulders that way, I still want to try to create a little more of a flow from one arm to another. So we kind of imagine this kind of connecting through the body. I mean, the other thing I can do is actually lower this shoulder so the shoulder actually matches in height. But in a lot of ways you can get away with just subtly positioning those arms so you get more of a clean flow. And again, thinking about those lines of action moving through the body, we want to try to keep those really simple and really consistent. And then another just general thought here, don't forget about the hands. Make sure you're kind of finishing off those lines, finishing off those poses. And there's no right or wrong here. By crooking the hands a little bit, I kind of continue these curves a little bit. I could also go the opposite direction and kind of create, a different kind of feeling here. Is a little bit more of a party kind of feeling there with the arms twisted out. Generally, in most cases, you want to kind of pick up the general flow of the arm and kind of just continue that through the hands just to keep things again nice and clean and straightforward. So that's looking much better here. That's feeling like a much stronger pose. I might suggest that you could push just a little farther on this pose and pick up on this line of action moving from this back foot forward. I would maybe think about actually trying to, aside from kind of connecting the arms up, I would also maybe try to connect up a little bit with this back leg. And so let's look at that. What I might do is I might raise this shoulder a little bit, pull that up. That also helps me align with this. And then kind of bend his arm so I'm picking up a little more on this flow from this foot here. And I can even position this just a little bit more. And you see now we're creating a little bit more of a clear line of action through there. And then it also might make sense to reverse the bend of this arm. Even though we've got a nice connection moving up through here, we could also potentially kind of counter that, change the IK orientation here. Oops, I'm hitting the wrong key there. I'm talking and trying to work. And bend that back. Now I still want to kind of connect these up a little bit. And so I'm going to bring the shoulder down a little. And again, try to get a little more flow through there. Now, what I've achieved by doing this is I've got a little stronger line of action that connects from the feet up through. And since the kicking out the back foot is sort of the fun of this pose, picking up on that line of action rather than just the line of action of the arms makes that a little stronger. And the other thing that we've done is we've created a little more asymmetry. This leg is bent down and this arm is bent up, and now this leg is bent up and this arm is bent down. So we've got a little more asymmetry, a little sort of almost a counterflow here from this line connecting here to this line connecting up through the body here. So I would argue that this pose overall is a little bit stronger than it was by adding that asymmetry, returning the balance, and again focusing on those lines of action moving through the body. Okay, let's take a look at another pose, and let's tweak another pose a little bit here. Okay, with this one, I want to start actually with this pose here. It's a fun pose. I like the idea of him kind of thrusting forward. It's very disco, and it's fine to have him up on his toe like this, but we've got a little bit of a problem with that. First of all, if I bring a guide layer down here and lock him to the floor, you can see the toe is actually poking through the floor. So not only are we trying to establish an illusion of weight and gravity, but we also need to establish the illusion that the character is actually standing on a solid surface. And if we pose the feet so they sort of punch through the ground plane, we destroy that illusion. The other problem is that it really doesn't feel very much like he can support his weight up on those tippy toes. And it's not that you can't ever put him really fully up on his tippy toes, but generally we want him on the balls of the feet. It's just going to make him feel a lot more solid, and like the and it's going to allow him to support his weight just a little bit better. So it's going to give us that sense of balance a little bit. Now, the other thing that I want to really caution you guys about is rotating the heel and the toe when you also have the foot rotated, because you're kind of getting into kind of counter rotations here where you've got the foot rotated and then you've also rotated the heel. Remember that when you lift the foot off the ground or even rotate the foot off the ground, you really should be zeroing out the heel generally, and then rotate with the foot rotator rather than with the heel rotation. But what I'm going to do here is actually, instead, I'm going to zero out the rotation of the foot itself. So I'm actually going to zero that out and keep that flat. And then we can have him lift up his heel. If you're rotating the heel, generally you want to zero out the rotation of the foot itself. And then the other thing I'm going to do is zero out the toe. So now he is now standing firmly on that ground plane, and you can see right away there's a better sense of him being able to support his weight with that ball of the foot rather than the tippy toe there. So that's feeling quite a bit better. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to create a little better of a line of action. This arm and this foot are working kind of nicely together to create a line of action through here, but this arm feels a little disjointed and not connected with that flow. Also, when he's raising his arm up like this, I would automatically move the shoulder up, because if you're really reaching upward, you are going to rotate your shoulder up, and you're gonna extend your shoulder up a little bit. So I would start by pulling this shoulder up. So let's pull that up quite a bit. Okay, And then we can kind of play with this strong line of action, this strong diagonal line of action right through there a little better. And then I want to continue it with the hand again. So I want that hand to be a part of that flow. And the same with this hand. I think crooking out the hand is fine. That gives him, it's sort of dancey. It sort of gives him a little flourish, a little panache there, which is fine. But generally, you want to try to kind of follow those flows. So here now we've got a little bit better balance. Our foot feels a little less wonky, and we've got a nicer kind of line of action through the body there. So that one's working a little bit better too. Okay. Let's move on to another example here. So we're gonna jump to another couple of poses here we want to look at. Oh yeah, we have the handstand. Okay, quite a few people like trying these kind of more rad poses here where you've got him balanced up on his arm. But we still have to really think about our weight. And in this case, he quite obviously would be sort of tumbling forward here. The bulk of his weight is really way forward of where he's supporting his weight on his hand here. So the first thing I want to do is fix that. Now in this case, I'm going to actually change the shoulder position here. So let's start with that. So I'm going to grab this hand here and I'm going to move this shoulder up so it's more centered on his body here. And then we're going to pull him back. Now, in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and move the hand. Again, as I talked about, generally you're going to want to keep the foot or the hand that's on the ground stable. But just to go a little bit faster here, let's go ahead and pull that forward a little bit. And then we can raise him on his cog, raise him back up, and get that weight distributed just a little bit better there. Okay, that's feeling a lot better to me. And then we can kind of reposition the other limbs accordingly. Another thing that I would consider here is closing the thumb and just letting the thumb come closed and maybe rotate this forward just a little bit so it's almost like fist on the ground. Again, these characters don't have very articulated hands, so we can't get a really strong feeling of like the open hand. Doesn't just work particularly well with these rigs. I'm going to pull them forward just a little bit more there. There we go. That's feeling quite a bit better. So now you see we've got the weight is distributed just a little bit better there just by moving that shoulder position, so we're a little more in the center of his body, and then the rest of the limbs are kind of counterbalancing. Okay, now the other thing that we want to think about is positioning the feet. Generally with this particular character, because they don't really have sort of true ankles, we almost always want to avoid kind of doing the straight line here, because that starts to get sort of confusing. It's a little hard to read what's happening. So I pretty much always want a little bit of rotation off of the end of that foot just to give me a better feeling there. And then the crook of the foot here feels a little bit extreme to me, and it doesn't feel particularly motivated. I would just pull that back a little, give it a little bit of softness, but then I would do the same on this foot here and give that foot just a little bit of softness too, as if he's kind of kicked his legs up in the air, and that gives me a little nicer silhouette. And then the arm here, I want the arm to kind of flow a little better with our line of action here. So I'm also going to raise the shoulder up on that arm, so that matches just a little bit better. And then I'm going to kind of play off of this arc through the body here. Maybe raise that shoulder up just a little bit more, and then pull this out just a little bit. Okay, now I feel like we have a better sense of weight, a better sense of balance here, and just a little bit of a nicer silhouette, a little bit nicer flow with those limbs. So that one's working quite a bit better. Okay, let's move on and take a look at one more. Let's go ahead and open this one here. In looking at this pose here, there's a few things that are feeling a little bit funny. The main thing is his shoulders are so very high. Now you can definitely, in extreme situations when he's reaching up and you're trying to create a real extreme feeling there, getting the shoulder very high can be useful. But if your shoulders are going to be as higher than the eyeball or as high as the eyeball, you really need to have a very good motivated reason to do that. And I don't really feel like this pose requires that, or that these very high shoulders are really adding anything to this pose. So I'm going to definitely get these arms, these shoulders down at least below the eyes, even if we still want to have them up fairly high. And let's bring this other one down as well and get this one down. So it's at least under the eyes. And you can see right away that looks a lot more natural and just feels a little better. Now the other thing is that these arms are pretty symmetrical. So I would also want to look at creating a little more asymmetry with these arms as well. And so one of the things that we've got going here is we've got this knee bent down and then this elbow bent up. So it might be fun to just reverse it here on the other side for that sense of asymmetry. So I'm going to reverse that, pull the hand up to kind of work with that. And by doing that, I'm seeing that I also have an opportunity here to create a little flow from this arm to this arm. So I'm going to bring this shoulder down a little more too, so those connect up just a little bit more. And there we have a little bit more asymmetry, a little bit of a stronger silhouette there because of that asymmetry. The last thing I would say is this little toe up right here. That's another thing that I'm not sure if this is really gaining anything for this pose. It's sort of cute, but it's also a little bit of a disconnect, and it sort of interrupts the flow of this leg a little. I once again wouldn't probably do this myself unless I had a fairly strong motivation to do so. And this feels a little more solid, is a little more rooted on the ground. And maybe the final thing I would do is just pull his weight forward just a tiny, tiny bit so that he feels just a titch more balanced. And here, let's scooch that a little bit so we still have that kind of knee to the ground feeling. There we go. Now he feels his weight feels a little more centered off the ball of this foot and the front foot there. We still essentially have the same pose, but it's just a little more natural. We've added a little asymmetry. We've got a little better flow through these arms here, and that's just feeling a little bit nicer overall. I hope it's been helpful for you to see how I approach kind of tweaking and finessing these poses to give them a little stronger silhouettes, give them better balance, better flow through the lines of action. Once you start making the characters actually begin to move, these pose lessons are going to become increasingly important to make sure that your character has the right sense of weight and balance and a sense of gravity in the frame, and to make sure that your movement is charming and attractive and clear and easy to see and easy to understand. That's it for episode 1. I hope you learned a bunch and feel a little more comfortable with posing and using the rigs. Next up, you'll be learning a whole lot about jumps. So good luck. I'll see you next week.